What's up, CEOs? It's Hilary Johnson here, the CEO and founder of Hatch Tribe. And today we are here for a training all about sales. And we're going to work on sales strategy. Now, I want to tell you from the outset, the goal of this session is to help you feel way more confident and empowered in sales in your business. And we're going to dig into several components of sales that are going to help you do just that. But this is the place that we need to start. And I'm going to read this to you verbatim and we're going to break it down because I want you to really understand what you actually know already is already working for you. We just need to correct the other part. Keep yourself positive, cheerful, and goal-oriented. Sales success is 80% attitude and only 20% aptitude. What tends to happen, and I've seen this time and time again with the women in our community, with clients that I've worked with individually, is that we tend to get really down on ourselves and we allow some of that negative thinking to cause us to think that we need training. And like an astronomical amount of training before we will ever be prepared for sales. And inherently, that is not true. And this quote illustrates that perfectly. So what Brian is saying, and I believe this 100%, sales success is about attitude. If you're positive and you're cheerful and you're goal-oriented and you come into it with, and we're going to talk about this word humanity, if you come into it with humanity, you're going to do great. Only about 20% of your ability to be great in sales is skills related. And so you don't need to go off for like the next 8 months and build this giant sales strategy. You need to go through this training and go take action, but you've got to do this from a headspace that's positive, cheerful, and goal-oriented. And I think in order to get there, we've got to debunk some common statements, some common limiting beliefs, and I hear these all the time. So we're going to go into that in just a minute. But first, I want to remind you where we are in the process. So as you know, I teach the Thrive method, and this is how you can build a really brilliant, thriving business, and it requires you to step into your shoes as the CEO of your business. Not always being that tactician who's got to touch all the things and do all the things and who stays buried under the task, but rather the type of person who says, I'm going to build a plan, I'm going to go drive it and execute it, and I'm going to start building these smart automations and bring people in to help me so that over time, my business can grow and thrive and it will be sustainable over the long haul. And so where sales really fits in is between pillar 1 and 2. So pillar 1 is arrive. As you know, this is where we build our strategy. It's where we set our goals. It's where we understand the vision for our business. And drive is pillar number 2. And that's where we're really getting after the sales and marketing in our business because as you know, those are the growth engines. So it's where those two pieces meet that we get the strategy specifically for sales. And this is how everything comes together. So sales strategy in a nutshell is always going to stem from the business goal. You know, there's no point in heading out into the marketplace and trying to sell a bunch of stuff if you haven't really thought about what you're trying to achieve in your business. So that's how we know that business goal is critically important. We need that first. But after that, we want to set sales goals. And then really the flow of sales is going to always look the same way. Prospecting, okay, who are we going after? Outreach, yeah, well, we got to go reach out to them now and say hello and introduce ourselves and start the sales cycle. There's a moment of presentation. Of course, this is where you're presenting what it is that you sell or what it is you do. Objections, this is where potentially your client, your potential new client is coming back and saying like, hey, I got some questions. I'm not sure about this. Is this the right time? Is it the right fit? And you're helping them navigate that. You're closing. So once you handle those objections and you can bring them to a close, maybe you're signing a contract, they're purchasing, whatever the case may be, and then you're delivering that product or service, whatever it is that you do. So in today's agenda, we're going to work through a couple of things. The first is I want to just revisit the sales funnel, and we're going to talk about how this overlaps with the marketing funnel so you can really see where the two pieces fit together. We're going to go back to what I talked about, your mindset, because in sales, if 80% of it is about your attitude, we need to make sure that there are not some pesky limiting beliefs that are still getting in your way. Then we're going to dig into prospecting, outreach, and follow-up. These are 3 pieces that I find in working with virtually all of my clients. If we can get those 3 on lock and we're doing good with those, that's going to take care of about 80% of what you need to be doing. The rest of it's kind of optimizing, say, negotiation skills, and those can come later. But I need you to get these 3 on lock up front. And the last piece is we're going to talk about good metrics, meaning what should you be measuring when we're talking about sales? And here's a little sneak peek. It's not about the money. All right? Okay, let's go. So let's talk about this sales and marketing funnel. So again, I want to make sure we're getting grounded in how all this comes together. So if you went through the marketing strategy training, this is going to look really familiar. As all things go, and we will always start at the top of the funnel where there's boatloads of people that are strangers. They don't yet know you, they don't know your business, they don't know anything about the product or service you sell. And the first stage of that is bringing awareness. And so typically speaking, awareness is almost always driven by marketing. There are some exceptions to that rule, but typically marketing is serving that top part of the funnel. But as people start to shift down through the funnel, coming to consideration where they're deciding if they want to buy your product or service, and then they're making that actual purchase decision, sales is now way more prevalent. And depending on the product or service you sell, you may be intimately involved in that. So it could be you or someone on your team is sitting down with one other human or 2 other humans or a team of other humans, and you're helping facilitate the consideration and decision phases of that. Now, for others of you, you may not be. There may be no one-on-one part of the sales equation. It could be happening online. And in that case, sales is going to look a little bit different. But for most businesses, sales does start to come into the picture at about the consideration phase. And what we know with the marketing and sales funnel is that the entire purpose is to develop the know, like, and trust factor. So in order for someone to make a purchase from a business, they need to feel confident that they're making a really good decision, right? Nobody wants to feel stupid. Nobody wants to feel like they've made a bad decision with their money. So your marketing efforts and your sales efforts should always be aiding that customer or client to feel more confident that they know you, that they like you, and that they trust you, because they're getting ready to give you some hard-earned money for you to deliver what it is that you do. And so we remember that throughout the course of the buyer's journey, at the very beginning, the light bulb is barely turned on. They're just becoming aware of the pain or an opportunity that they really need to solve. And that interest and consideration part, you're playing a far more active role in really helping them through that process and helping give them the information they need that's going to help them make a good decision ultimately at the end, right? And the thing to remember, as we've talked about before, buyers are on their own journey. But the key for you, and especially as it relates to sales, is listen. Listen to what your potential clients are saying and make sure that you're giving them things, information, resources that's helping answer their questions, because that's going to help bring them closer to making a purchase and ideally making a purchase from you. So let's dig into the sales mindset. As I mentioned before, 80% of sales is about what's happening between your ears. It's about the mindset you're bringing to the table. It's about your attitude, about how you're thinking about it. And you and I both know negative thinking about anything is going to interact and affect everything else in your business. So we want to make sure that these limiting beliefs or thought patterns are not showing up for you as it relates to sales, because if they are, we need to correct them and correct them now. I suck at sales. This is one that I hear a lot. When we send out surveys, especially to our audience, we often will hear back like, yeah, I suck at sales, or I suck at marketing, and I'm not good at this. So let's just debunk this in a couple of ways. So the first thing is, do you really suck at sales? And the question I would ask you is, have you never, ever, ever ever in your entire life like sold something? For most of you, because you already own a business and you're already earning money, you have sold something. So you've sold it. Somebody bought it. You don't always suck at sales, right? You've sold something. You're good at it. You might not feel confident or highly confident, and that's okay. And this is what I want you to hear. You do not need to be highly confident in order to be good at sales. So what I'm going to ask you to do is that if this is your thought pattern, you got to stop saying it to yourself. You got to stop thinking it. What I want you to repattern with is a different statement, which is like, I am learning sales and I'm getting better at sales every single day. And you are. Sales is sleazy. This is another one that I hear almost exclusively from women. I very, very rarely hear this from men. So why is this? Well, I think on one hand, it probably comes from an experience. So ask yourself, have you ever been in a scenario where sales was sleazy? I can picture you right now, and I think that you're nodding your head yes. So it's like, yeah, I have been, and maybe it was when you bought your car, because we always joke about car dealerships, right? Or maybe it was even in your business now. Maybe like someone was trying to sell you something and you're like, ugh, this is so gross. Like, I cannot believe like what this is feeling like right now. Now, let's think about another scenario. Have you ever been in a scenario where you bought something and you really loved the person you were working with? Like, you thought they were great, they were cool, you felt really good about the buying decision. Have you ever been in a situation where you bought something and it was a great experience, or even just a good experience, or even just not sleazy? Like, it was just fine. I know that that answer is yes, because we are in a society where we buy a lot. And chances are you have made purchases personally or professionally, and you did not have a disgusting experience in that transaction. So what I want you to remember is that sales is not sleazy. It can be. If you are, it is. If you're not, it's not. So don't be sleazy, and sales is not sleazy. So we've got to repattern that. All right, you with me? Okay, let's look at one more. I'm afraid of being judged, rejected, ridiculed. All right. Listen, these are very, very common feelings, very common limiting beliefs. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be ridiculed. Judgment is a very common fear. It's often what prevents people from putting themselves out into the world. Of really, like, maybe even for you right now, like there may be some fear of putting out your marketing because you're afraid of what people will think. So on that one, what we've got to say is, well, if we don't put it out there, we don't have the opportunity to be judged or to not be judged. We don't have the opportunity for anybody to even see it, to be served, and to be excited by it. What about rejection? Well, let's just go ahead and call it like it is. Are you going to make 100% of the shots you take? No, because no one does. Michael Jordan doesn't. Oprah doesn't. Rihanna doesn't. Beyonce doesn't. Right? Nobody. You hear me? Like, legit, you got to hear me on this. Nobody makes 100% of the shots they take. So instead of viewing it as rejection, just hear it as like it wasn't a match. Like, we were not a good fit for one another. And that's okay, because not every person is. Like, and truly, if you tried to serve every single person in the world, you'd be miserable and they'd be miserable. You'd be trying to people please all the time. It would suck. This is not a state of joy. So what we're really looking for with sales is a good match. And that's it. Is it a good match for them? Is it a good match for you? If so, yes, it's a win-win. And the last piece, ridiculed. Listen, if somebody is a jackass to you and they give you like some kind of scathing response to your sales email or a call or whatever, Hear me loud and clear. That's about them. It's not about you. They're a jerk. Hang up the phone and move on. Or delete the email and move on. It does not matter. That is about them, not about you. Okay, you feeling like we cleared some chi out of the world there? All right. You've got to set aside these things because they will hold you back. And so what I'm going to encourage you is that as we go through this and you start thinking about sales in your business, I want you to be thinking about taking action, even though you may still have some doubt in your mind about being good at sales, because you get good by doing, and by doing, you are going to blaze through those limiting beliefs. It's the only way through. You got to do it. And it starts with prospecting. So this is really the very first piece of any part of sales. We need to have a very clear picture of who it is that we are trying to sell to. So I'm going to break down, in this case, we've got 3 tips about prospecting. And each of these are really important. So the first is prospecting really starts with research. And this is about sitting down and taking that ideal customer profile that you already have and saying, okay, this is what that person looks like in my mind's eye. Now I need to go out and find some real life people who are that. So wherever you have left off the most recent edition of your ideal customer profile, pull it back out. Put that next to you, and then get creative and start thinking about where you could go find real life people who kind of look and feel like that. Now, to be clear, you're not going to know with 100% certainty, and that's okay. Because part of the deal with prospecting is like you're doing your best guess. So for example, if your ideal customer profile was, say, a woman who was in her early 30s, who was married with a couple kids, who lives in a certain zip code, et cetera, we're going to take all of that kind of and bake it into your brain, right? And then go out into some platforms where you might start searching for that person. So you might go to Instagram and look for accounts that that type of person might follow. You might go to LinkedIn and kind of use your own network to navigate through and find people who fit that. You might go on Google and actually put out a search, and that wouldn't be a good example of searching that way, but if there was something psychographically about them, we could search that. We could go into Facebook groups. We can ask our friends for people that fall into that. We can ask for referrals from our current customers and clients. But the key with sales always is that it starts with you. You know, it really starts with having a very solid understanding of the type of person that you do want to work with, and then going out into the world and looking for real life examples of those people. And again, don't judge them too critically. You know, the rule of thumb that we always joke is like, you know, if it's about 80% of the way there, then it's good enough. And I'm a believer in that, even when it comes to prospecting, because the truth is, until you talk to somebody, you don't know if they're the right fit. So the best you can do is kind of judge them from afar. And I mean that in an affectionate manner. You know, you're looking at what you can see and saying, is it a possibility they could be? But what I would tell you is that even in the case of prospecting, lower that 80% down even further. Maybe they're about 60 or 70% of the way there. Like you can kind of see that they might be a fit, but don't prejudge them. Like pull them onto the prospect list and then take them from there. Now, number 2, and this gets to the prospect list piece, is you have got to have a database where you keep track of your leads and you need to commit to using it 100% of the time. And the reason this is really important is because if you don't have this, you are starting from scratch every single time you sit down to do sales. And that's a losing strategy. So when sales works and when it works really well, you're creating a list of people that you want to reach out to. And then every time you reach out, you're keeping track of them, where they are in the process. And so every time you sit down to work on sales, you just go back into that and you're like, all right, these are my people. These are the people I want to reach out to. And you're not recreating the wheel. So I encourage you to commit to using something, and it could be a spreadsheet, and that's fine. Many business owners will use that. But I recommend using HubSpot. There's a free CRM, and on the resources slide, I have a link to that for you. So I love that as a tool, and it's a great way to just keep track of contacts and people you're reaching out to, and also keep some notes about them as you go. Now, point 3 about prospecting is that you cannot get stuck here. Prospecting is not sales. It's the beginning of sales. It's the piece you have to begin sales. But it is critically important that you are not spending all of your time prospecting, because sales doesn't happen here. So I would use the 80-20% or 80-20 rule here, which means, like, let's just say in an average week, like, you end up carving out a time block where you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to work on sales, say 4 hours this week. Okay, cool. Then I don't want you spending any more than an hour out of that entire week prospecting, because the rest of the time really needs to be spent on doing the outreach. And that's going to take a little longer, because you need to be thoughtful in communication, and you're following up with prior leads, and you're staying in flow in communication. So the key here really is just, yeah, you got to do it, but do not allow yourself to get stuck here, because this is not where the money is going to be made. Okay, that's prospecting. So let's move on to part 2. So, now at this point, you've got, say, a list of prospects. Maybe you have 50 of them, and you're looking at them and you're like, yeah, they could be like perfect clients for me. I'm digging them. They feel like they're the right fit. Okay, yeah, so now what? Well, we've got to reach out to them. Like, they don't know about you at all. You're the one, the ball is in your court. You got to reach out to them and do something, right? So the first piece of this, and I cannot say this firmly enough, you got to schedule the time to do this. And it should be something you put on auto repeat in your calendar, like a recurring invite to yourself to do sales. Schedule it, do it, repeat it. The only way you're going to get good at sales is by repeating it. People who are really good at sales do it every darn day, every darn week. They're back in there. They're running with it. And I just cannot say this enough. Sales is built on consistency. It's about showing up. And a lot of that is showing up for you. It's the commitment that you have made to yourself and to your business that you are going to do this work because you want to grow it. You want to make new contacts. You want to serve new people. You have to do the work. So I encourage you, put something on your calendar like sales outreach and time block it. Let it be a recurring invite and commit to doing it, and do not schedule over it. I cannot say enough about this. Now, number 2. So, all right, you've got the time in your calendar. You sit down and now you're like, okay, cool. What am I going to do? So let's just say your first communication is going to be an email. Now, that's a common one, right? What may happen, and you may have had this experience before, is you go sit down to write the email and you're like, oh God, this sounds insane. Or I sound like a robot here. Like, what am I even saying right now? Be a real human and just use normal language. Like, write the email as if you were writing it to me. Like, think, okay, cool. I'm just going to email Hilary. Like, what would I write? Or like, I'm just going to email like my best friend Susan. What would I write? And make it normal. I know that you have been on the receiving end of some blanket emails that you look at and you're like, oh God, that's bad. Don't do that. Which means don't have a templated email and send it out to everybody without customizing it. It also means don't overthink it and make it sound like really robotic. Bring some personality into it. And I think one of the best ways to get good at this is, like, 1, say it out loud, just, kind of like I'm shooting the shit with you right now, right? Like, talk it out loud, but then ask a friend to read whatever you've written. So if you're going to use an email for that communication, like, have a friend look at it, because your friends are going to be way better at picking it apart in like a friendly way, and telling you just like, hey, this sounds a little robotic, or this sounds weird, or this doesn't make sense, or you're not being clear about what you're asking. Okay? So have a friend look at the communication to help you feel a little more confident in what you're sending out. Now, the third thing, and this is more of a reminder, make no assumptions. Okay? So it's really important that when you're working in that sort of sales cycle in your business and you're sending out communications of whatever kind they are, whether it's a phone call, email, a DM, a video, whatever, the response or lack thereof says nothing about you. What I tend to find is that when my clients are not getting responses, they start to self-judge. Like, oh my God, my email must have been terrible. And what I would tell you is that in about 95% of the cases, the email's fine, the phone call was fine, all the stuff is fine. You're judging the other person. So you're thinking like, well, they must have read my email and they must have thought it was terrible. That's why I'm not getting responses. But instead, consider the fact that like they saw it, they opened it, they haven't been able to reply. Or they saw it, they opened it, they read it, they're interested, they want to reply, they still haven't. Or they saw it, they haven't opened it. That's a possibility. They saw it, they weren't interested, they archived it or deleted it. That's also okay. It doesn't matter. So the important part when we're working on sales is that we are in no way judging the outcome. Because in many cases, and think back to that marketing funnel, right? It's going to be few people that get to the bottom from where we start. It's going to be no different. You're not going to get 100% responses. You're not going to get 100% of sales. So it's like, just make no assumptions about anything that's happening as it relates to sales. Now, if you get an email and a response that says, wow, this is really confusing, well, that could be a good indicator that something needs to change. But I would say, generally speaking, don't assume anything, and especially if there's a lack of a response. And the fourth piece I want to talk about as it relates to outreach, and this is critically important. You gotta be creative and you gotta break through the clutter. So here's where I can't tell you how many emails I get every single day that are templates that are copy pasted. And there's a lot of cues that tell you that. One, the formatting is usually whack. Two, often the wrong name is used. Three, you can tell there's no customization in it whatsoever. Four, there's nothing personal that tells me they know anything about me or anything about my business. Don't be that person. So one, minimally, don't copy paste, don't use templates in that way. But two, look at other ways that you can do stuff that's really unique to break through the clutter, because people are getting a lot of emails. And I've put a couple tips at the bottom here. Video messaging. This is one that we love. So we use a tool called Loom, and I've also got this in the resources section on the last slide. But Loom allows you to record a video message and send it to a potential client, and you actually get notified when they open it. It's really, really cool. And plus, when you insert that video into the email, it's actually a moving GIF, so it's very engaging and it's very cool. Snail mail, and I know that this sounds kind of funny because snail mail often would be perceived as a marketing tactic, but you can make it deeply personal. So that first contact that you have with a potential client could be a handwritten note, which is really amazing. So think about how few personal notes you get in the mail. Couldn't you break through the clutter there? It could be DMs, and do not underestimate the power of DMs. A really thoughtful DM just to initiate conversation can be super powerful. Also, gift drops. This is something that I've recently worked with a client of mine on. So she came up with a target of about 20 perfect clients for her that are basically affiliated businesses. And what she did is she went to them and personally dropped off these really awesome gift baskets. And it was basically an invitation to say, hey, if you refer business to me, I'm going to refer business to you. It was very cool. So anyway, there's lots of ideas here, and I encourage you to go beyond those, but you got to break through the clutter. So it's just, remember, if you're falling into the inbox like everybody else, you're not really standing out. And I actually want to give you one example of this that I think is really fun too. And this came from back in the day. I worked for a TV station and I had to sell advertising. And I will tell you, that's a tough gig. I mean, it's really tough. And I was responsible for selling to like small businesses. And as you can imagine, the budgets you need to run a really productive TV campaign are quite high. And so one of the guys who was on my team, he told me about a strategy he had used, which I loved. And I think that you'll dig this. So this is just to give you an idea of how you can break through the clutter. So he wanted to get a meeting with an attorney. And this was an attorney that was advertising on a different television station, but spending no money on hours. And so what he did was he thought, okay, how much do you think this guy makes per hour? Like, how much does he bill his clients? And so my friend Brian took his own personal checkbook and he wrote a check for, I think what he perceived would be like maybe $250 an hour, might have been this attorney's billing rate. So he wrote the attorney a check for $250 an hour, put it in a note, and he said, listen, I get it. You're a busy man. I know you get paid by the hour. I know you're advertising on this station, and what I'm asking is just give me an hour of your time because I'd love to talk to you about working with us and advertising on our station. Did he get a phone call? You're damn right he did. And he got the meeting, and he got the sale. And the attorney did not cash the check because he was like, I've never seen anybody do this in my entire life. So I'm just saying, there's all kinds of fun things you can do to break through the clutter. So have some fun with it. Plus, I love when I get crazy stuff because I'm like, somebody actually put thought into this, and I dig that. All right, moving on. So what we're skipping over a little bit here, but we're talking about follow-up because follow-up is something that really pertains to the cycle as a whole. So we would be talking about the immediate follow-up, like after you've had an initial contact, but also what you would be doing all the way through the sales cycle. So as somebody's progressing towards making a purchase, potentially moving towards a contract, it's just I want you to be thinking about follow-up as like, this is a critical part of the know, like, and trust factor developing. So when you send that first initial communication, you're just touching the iceberg, right? Like that's the top of the funnel. That's awareness, and that's it. We've done nothing else to facilitate bringing that further. And so what I want you to think about is that follow-up is really the rest of the sales and marketing cycle. It's the rest of the funnel. So we want to make sure that we are engaging beyond just the first communication. Now, I'm going to show you something that's going to change your world. And I'm going to give you all these. 48% of people never follow up with a prospect. So what this means is like half of all people get a potential lead and they do nothing with it. Holy crap. All right. 25% of people make a second contact and they stop. All right. So they reach out and they're done. 12% of people make 3 contacts and stop, but only 10% are making 3 contacts or more than 3 and beyond. Only 10% of people. So the question is, where is the sale happening in the cycle? Well, 2% are made on the first contact. Like, oh, wouldn't that be great? You reach out and you get a sale in the first time. Oh, but that's only 2% of the time. 3% are made on the second, 5% are made on the third, 10% are made on the 10th, or the 10% are made on the 4th, but 80% happen between the 5th to the 12th contact. All right, so you want to win? Be that 10% of people that reaches out more than 3 times, because that's where 80% of the sales are made. So get your competitive brain on right now. I want you to think about a competitor in your industry that's doing the same thing that you are. And the two of you go out and you're reaching out to the same leads. And I want to picture yourself right now being like, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up because I know that they are. They have just dropped this contact. They stopped reaching out. They're no longer going for the sale, but I am. I am in because I want to develop a relationship with this person. I want to stay in. I want to serve them. I want to help them. I know I can help them. But in order to do that, I got to stick around. And I will stick around 5 to 12 contacts because that's where the sales are made. This is why few people wildly win at sales. This is why there are those few whales in the sales industry, because they are persistent AF. They're the people that don't care. They don't care if there's a response or not a response. They're following up. They're on you the 5th time, the 12th time. They keep coming back. That's where the sales are made. So Excuse me for the cough. So what I want you to hear me loud and clear on is sales is not about sending one email to a potential prospect and never sending anything else. You have to keep following up, okay? So you're going to hear me repeat this. Schedule it, do it, repeat it. I want you to stay in the flow with sales. You're going to get really damn good at doing it, but you got to keep coming back to it and keep reaching out to folks and checking in and like, hey, how are things going? Wanted to see how things are. And the pro tip here, always follow up no matter how you feel about it. Your feelings are not a good judgment for sales. It is not how you should decide whether or not you're going to sit down. Oh, I don't feel like it. No. That is not a winning strategy for sales. I don't care how you feel about it. I don't care how you feel that day. Sit down and do the work. Like, do some thoughtful outreach. Okay? And again, remember, don't prejudge it. The lack of response doesn't mean that they will not be a buyer. It just means they didn't respond. And that is all you know factually. Okay? 2, always be tracking. And this is why that CRM or a tracking tool is really, really important. So every time you reach out, I want you to note when it was. The date's important because obviously you don't want to email someone like Monday and then get back in there on Tuesday and send them the same blasted email. Like, that'd be terrible. 2, you also want to use cues. So if they respond and they're like, hey, I'm interested, but like, can you check back with me in about 3 weeks? Yeah, totally. So you want to put notes in so that you can stay on top of it, because that way when you go back to sit down and work on sales the next time, you already know where you are, right? So always be tracking. And this does not take much time. Like this, I mean, truly taking notes for a lead shouldn't take more than a minute. And that's it, a minute per. And again, be a normal freaking human. Like, these follow-up emails don't have to be anything overly robotic. And they also don't have to be like, hi, I just saw that you didn't respond to my email. Like, maybe not a great strategy. So play around with it and experiment. And I really mean that. Play with different emails, different strategy. Sometimes these communications perhaps are something different. Maybe you actually pick up the phone. Like, if you've been lobbing over emails, maybe you sit down and you call somebody. I mean, that's kind of fun to talk to a human, you know? So you got lots of options. And again, don't forget, ask a friend. If you're unsure about, like, does this sound weird, just phone a friend or, lean on somebody inside of Hatch Tribe and see if they can give you some feedback, okay? So let's talk about good metrics. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, yes, we do want to measure revenue in the business and we want to know what type of revenue our sales efforts are generating. But when it comes to sales strategy and the metrics you want here, it is absolutely not about the sales itself. It's about something else. So let's just picture that your goal is to make $100,000. And that's you over here on the left-hand side. And you're like, I see it. I see that $100,000 at the top of the mountain. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Of course, we could set a goal for $100,000. But that doesn't tell us anything. It tells us what we want. It's a destination. But what the hell are you going to have to do to get there? So the result you want, the $100,000, is fine. But what we want to do is create metrics that are built on the actions that you need to take in your business in order to reach that goal, in order to get that $100,000. Those are the metrics that really matter when it comes to sales strategy. So here's some examples, and these are some that I really, really like. So for example, find, and all these blanks are where you're going to put a specific number. So find, for example, 10 prospects and add them to the database today. Research prospects for 2 hours today. Contact 25 prospects via email today. Ask 3 clients for referrals today. Send video messages to 5 of my second follow-ups today. Work on sales for 3 hours this week. Send snail mail to 5 prospects by Friday. Okay, so do you see what a good sales goal looks like? So what did we not see here? we don't see the end result. We don't see like, number of meetings booked, right? Because that's the end result of these things, right? We don't see $10,000, right? Because that's the end result of these things. The only part you can control is, did you do the prospecting, and did you reach out to the folks, and did you continue to reach out to the folks to get to the point of having a meeting, to get to the point of having a phone call, to get to the point of making a sale? Because all the rest of that flows downstream. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is set goals like this for your business and really think about that which you can control. So this brings us to the end. It is your turn. You're going to find a file called the Sales Activation Plan. And there's at the top just a checklist of things that I want to make sure you have in place. These are things that we talked about in today's training, and I want to make sure you've got them. And a couple of these, to be clear, are making sure the time is on your calendar and you have a really good CRM tool that you're using to track sales. But the next thing you're going to do is set a 30-day sales goal, and it's going to be focused on the front end, that which you can control. So number of new prospects, people that you're going to put on the database, people you're going to reach out to, number of time or hours that you're going to focus on sales, that type of stuff. And I'm even going to encourage you to create a break through the clutter sales strategy that you're going to test in the next 30 days. Now, on this last page, I do have a couple of resources for you. These are things that we've talked about throughout the training today. So if you have questions on any of these, of course, you can pop them inside of the CEO Collective Facebook group or on this lesson itself, and we'll be happy to help and weigh in. If you have any questions at all about building your sales strategy and making sure that you're doing something that's going to be productive, if you're unclear about the goal or unclear about any of it, reach out, ask for support. And you noted in the training, I told you, get some feedback from your friends about what you've created for those outreach communications. And a great place to ask for that support is inside the CEO Collective. We're happy to take a look at it, so don't hesitate to put it there. All right, I wish you all kinds of luck in your sales efforts, and I will talk to y'all very soon. Good luck.